Good morning, afternoon and evening all. This is Yorkie with episode 14 of my in-depth track guide series, and this week we are taking a look at the Korea International Circuit from Korea. We're going to follow the usual video format, starting off with the breakdown, then jumping into the hot lap, followed by the setups at the end of the video. So let's get on with it. Okay, so starting off with the breakdown then, we're going to gain control of the car just as we enter into turn 14. It doesn't really matter how we take turn 14, it's more about turns 15, 16, and 17 that really matters. So this one, you need to hook up this one relatively well. Get a good exit, try and maximise the acceleration coming out the corner. Once you transition into this long right-hander here, that's when you start draining the curves. And as you come over towards the start-finish line, open up the DRS and keep to the right-hand side of the track, ready for turn 1. Our braking point for this first corner then is just before the 100-metre board and at the start of the red and white curbing on the right hand side of the track there. You're going to be shifting down relatively rapidly through the gears, shifting from 7th gear all the way down into 1st. You try and get the car slowed down before the corner, and basically we're going to hang to the right hand side of the track as late as possible and then throw the car in. So doing exactly that, just as we pass the yellow board on the right hand side of the track there, we're going to start throwing the car in towards the apex of this corner. You want to be kind of hooking up the curb on the inside, although the curbs on this track are actually quite large, so most of them you do want to avoid. Your apex speed should be about 65 miles per hour, which equates to 105 kilometers per hour. And this one you can take a bit of curb on the inside, it's not too high. So clipping that quite nicely as you come out through the exit, you should be balancing the throttle. You should run out wide, use a bit of the extra turf on the exit there to try and maximise some of the speed. Turn 2 is completely flat out, and you should be starting to drain your curves, about 20% of it as you come down this straight. Open the DRS at the activation point. We're going to slowly bring the car to the left hand side of the track, ready for turn 3. Again, another harsh braking zone, and it starts at the end of this red barrier on the left hand side of the track there, approximately 140 odd metres from the apex of the corner. So we're going to be braking very, very hard then, shifting down the gears again rapidly all the way down from 7th all the way down into 1st. We're going to keep to the left hand side of the track, but this time you kind of want to avoid the curb on the inside a lot more. It's a very, very high curb, so you basically just want to brush that on the inside here. Your apex speed should be about 55 miles per hour, which equates to 90 kilometers per hour, and providing you haven't hit the curb too hard, you should be able to get on the throttle relatively early and just start balancing it. If you do clip this curb quite hard, it can send the rear end out sideways ever so slightly, stepping it out, meaning you have to make corrections to catch it again. So hooking that up quite nicely, using the curb on the exit. Once you've got the car completely straight, that's when you get full throttle, and you're then going to start draining the curves from 3rd gear down into 5th. You should be using about 35% of your curves as you bring the car to the right hand side of the track, ready for turn 4. Our braking point for this corner is just as we get into the 100-metre board, and again we're going to be shifting from 6th, 7th gear all the way down into 1st. But you can actually run a little bit deep into this braking zone, as the apex is actually a rather late one, so that gives you an extra little bit of breathing room. As we do so here, we're going to actually turn relatively late, and we're going to slowly bring the car in towards the inside curb. You should be clipping the curb at this point just here with an apex speed of about 55 miles per hour, which equates to 90 kilometers per hour. And because of this late apex, it's going to help us open up turn 5 that follows. And from this point onwards, you should be starting to balance the throttle. As you get the wheel straight coming out through the exit of this corner, you kind of want to hang towards the middle of the track. Give it quite a sharp spurt of the throttle as we come up towards turn 5. And just as we get into the orange barrier on the arm curve on the far left hand side of the track just there, that is our braking point for turn 5. It's a very, very short braking point. It's literally just a stab of the brake and shifting down from 2nd gear back down into 1st. So we're going to keep to the left hand side of the track to try and open up this corner. It's relatively slow. Again, we need to sacrifice the exit, ready for the turn 6 that follows. And as we come in towards the apex of this corner, you should be clipping the curb on the inside here. It's a curb that you can clip. It's quite low. It's not too aggressive. But your apex speed should be about 65 miles per hour, which equates to 105 kilometers per hour. And again, coming out through the exit of this corner, you should be balancing the throttle and giving it another short spurt, ready on the run to turn 6. Like I said, hang towards the middle of the track, bring it over to the right hand side of the track, and you're then going to lift off and transition into turn 6. This one, you kind of want to avoid the curb on the inside, so instead just try and get as close to it as possible. Your apex speed should be about 60 miles per hour, which equates to 95 kilometers per hour. And providing you've got a similar line to what I'm doing here, you should have a very good exit. You should be able to point the car towards the exit of the corner, pointing towards that outside curb, getting the wheel straight as soon as possible, and get on that throttle. As you come up through the gears, you should be starting to drain your curves again, only about 20% as we now come into the flat out turn 7. Just brush the curb on the inside, avoid the curb running through turn 8, but just try and get as close to it as possible. Keep a nice smooth flowing line, bring the car over to the right hand side of the track, ready for turn 9. Our braking point is roughly at this white bit of tarmac that extends on the right hand side of the track there, going off to the side of the screen. It's roughly here that I start braking. It's just shifting from 6th gear down into 4th. You want to try and keep up as much speed as possible. But coming into this corner, you're basically just going to drop those 2 gears, throw the car in, and you want to try and ride the curb on the inside. Your apex point should be just on this inside curb just here, an apex speed of about 140 miles per hour, which equates to 225 kilometers per hour. And as you may have noticed, I've immediately shifted back up into 5th just to try and keep the engine a little bit quieter as I was reaching the very top of the rev range. Coming through this point just here, you should be bringing the throttle back in. You're then going to transition over to the left hand side of the track to try and open up this turn 10. This is roughly where I'll start braking for this corner. There's no real reference points that I can point out to you. It's more just based on judgment and feel as to how quickly I actually came out of turn 9. But it's from here we're going to be shifting down from 5th gear down into 1st. Doing exactly that, coming over to the left hand side of the track. We're going to throw the car in towards the apex of the corner. Again, this is a curb that you want to avoid. Instead, just brush it with an apex speed of about 65 miles per hour, which equates to 105 kilometers per hour. Let the car drift over to the left hand side of the track upon the exit. Just try and straighten up that wheel as soon as possible. Obviously balance the throttle, and once you get up into 2nd gear, that's when you should be bringing it back into full throttle again. We're going to stay off the curves as we run the curve ever so slightly upon the exit. Bring the car over to the right hand side of the track, ready for turn 11. Throwing the car in, you want to hook up 2 apexes. The first one is basically just trying to get as close to the curb on the inside there upon the entry to the corner, and basically at this point here, when you start to see the corner start to shallow out, that is our braking point. We're basically just going to trail brake through throughout the duration of this corner, shifting down from 5th gear down into 3rd to try and get it slowed down for the second part and the more important apex. So the car drifts out to the middle of the track slightly as we're braking. We're then going to bring it back in and hook up this apex point just here. Your apex speed should be about 110 miles per hour, which equates to 175 kilometers per hour. Turn 12 immediately follows, and you can see it just up ahead there. But you kind of want to keep turning and try and open up this turn 12. It'll give you a nice good exit, allowing you to get on the gas and earlier and also heavier. So transitioning across. I threw the car across a little bit too much, and it's kind of stepped out of the car and pulled it away from the apex ever so slightly, but it's not too bad. You basically just want to run the curb on the inside with an apex speed of 110 miles per hour again, which equates to 175 kilometers per hour. And at this point you should be balancing the throttle probably about 50-60%, bringing it back in and letting the car drift over to the outside of the track. We're going to run over to the right hand side of the track to open up turn 13. It's basically just a slight lift of the throttle as we come into the entry. Clip the curb on the inside. Your apex speed should be about 130 miles per hour, which equates to 210 kilometers per hour. And at this point here, you should be bringing the throttle back in quite aggressively. Let the car drift over to the right hand side of the track. Try and use the full width. And then we're going to bring it back over left again, ready for turn 14. So doing exactly that. Just as we come into this point here, this is roughly our braking zone. Again, very little reference points that I can show you. Instead, it's more based on judgment and feel. But we're going to be shifting down from 5th gear down into 3rd. And we're basically just going to throw the car in towards the apex of the corner. You want to try and sacrifice the exit, as it will allow you a better run into turn 15. So doing exactly that, coming into the curb on the inside here, you can ride this one relatively aggressively despite its height. Your apex point should be just here with an apex speed of 95 miles per hour, which equates to 150 kilometers per hour. And like I said, as long as you hang towards the middle of the track upon the exit of here, you should be able to get a good run into turn 15. So doing exactly that, balancing the throttle and bringing it back in. Coming from the middle of the track, back over to the right hand side to open up this corner. And just as that flatbed truck on the outside of the barrier there disappears off the side of your screen, that is our braking point. It's basically shift down from 3rd gear down into 2nd. It's a relatively short braking zone, but it's quite important. You do need to get the car slowed down before the entry of this corner, as it will cause you to run out wide. But getting that car slowed down and throwing it in towards the apex of the corner, you should be hooking up the inside curb here. Again, it's quite low, so you can hook this one up aggressively. Your apex point should be here with an apex speed of about 85 miles per hour, which equates to 135 kilometers per hour. You should be balancing the throttle upon the exit and not getting on it too aggressively, as it will cause you to run out wide. You want to try and let the car drift over. Use the astroturf on the exit, but try and keep 2 wheels within those white lines. Turn 16 should be pretty much full throttle. Coming through turn 17 now, you can either use the curves like I am here, or you can hold it until this point here. As soon as you get the curve straight, drain the rest of the curves there, and basically just run down to the start finish line to complete your lap. Okay, so now that the breakdown's complete, we're now going to move on to the hot lap, which is exactly the same lap that I just showed you there, but completely unedited, and I'm also going to be quiet so you guys can listen to my throttle inputs and also the engine sounds, just to get a real general sense of the speed and what I was talking about in the breakdown back there. Okay, so that was a dry hot lap. We're now going to move on to a wet one and talk about the braking points and the different apexes and curves usage in this kind of conditions. So coming into these final couple of corners, pretty much exactly the same approach as a dry. You need to get this corner pretty much nailed down. Once you get the car transitioned into this right hand, that's when you start draining the curves towards the start finish line. Again, keep to the right hand side of the track ready for turn 1. And our braking point is actually exactly the same place as it was in the dry. At the start, the red and white curbing on the outside, shift all the way down into first gear. Avoid the curb on the inside, try and hook up the traction on the exit. And then once you come out through the exit of turn 2, you're actually going to drain about 30-40% of your curves this time rather than 20. As we come down this long straight, obviously we've got no DRS, so we need to reach that top speed as soon as possible. Again, the same braking point pretty much at the start, or at the end, sorry, of the barrier on the outside. Hook up the apex again, just off the curb, try and get a nice exit, and again, draining about 20-30% of your curves as we now come down towards turn 4. Our braking point is about 5 meters earlier than it was in the dry. Again, hook up that late apex, try and push through any wheel spin that you have on the exit, and obviously try and sacrifice the exit of both of these corners for the following. We missed the apex of turn 6 by quite a large margin, but the exit isn't too bad. We're going to drain about 10% of our curves coming down in towards turn 7. Again, completely flat out. Try and avoid the curbs on both corners, turn 8 and also 7. Hook up the curve on turn 9 again, and it's actually the same approach as it was in the dry. And then once again, turn 10, slight lock up there, which caused me to go a little bit deep, but not too bad. Turn 11, same approach as it was in the dry again. Hook up that relatively late apex, try and open up the second part and try and get on the throttle as early as possible. Try and maximise the speed through here, just again another lift off, use the full width of the track as we now come into turn 14. Ride the curb relatively aggressively, try and watch any wheel spin. We've actually come quite a way off the apex of that turn 15 there, but getting a good exit. And as we come out through the exit of turn 17, as we come down straight towards the start finish line, so we can drain the rest of the curves and complete our lap. So we're now going to move on to the setups, both the dry and also the wet laps that I did back there. For the dry, on the aero we were using a 2-2 both on front and rear. For our braking we were using a 48-52 with a high standard pressure size. For our anti-roll bar balance we're using a 9 on the front and then 1 on the rear. For our suspension we're using a 1-1 and then a relatively soft front spring stiffness with a 5 and then 1 on the rear. Those are the gear ratios that I was using in miles per hour, and then of course the gear ratios again in kilometers per hour. And then finally the toe and camber settings, which are very similar to most other tracks, pretty much all the way left on the front and then slightly left on the rear. Toe left as default. So starting off with the wet lap, we're using a 2-3 for wing angles, using 48-52 on brake balance, and then pressure was a medium, brake size standard. Slightly softer front anti-roll bars this time, same rear anti-roll bars, again exactly the same suspension setup as well. And then finally the gear ratios that we have there in miles per hour, and then of course the gear ratios again in kilometers per hour. And finally the toe and camber settings, which are pretty much exactly the same as the dry. But that's going to conclude it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please give it a rating. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And of course, do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. It'd be very much appreciated if you subscribe to my Twitter as well. But hopefully I'll see you soon, guys. In the meantime, take care.